So what does Star Wars mean to me? Star Wars is a franchise that I care deeply about. It's something that's been a part of my childhood and upbringing. It's brought my family together, something that we bond over. I vividly remember watching the movies on my birthday. As a kid, looking at these scenes of spaceships having dogfights in the vast and starry skies, seeing people using the Force, and battling with lightsabers filled my imagination with wonder and amazement. Growing older, I understood more about the substance and themes of Star Wars: light and darkness, good versus evil, sacrificing for the greater good, and even redemption. Star Wars may not be the perfect franchise, but its themes are endless and ring true. In recent years, Star Wars has been losing its standards, with subpar writing and failing to stay true to its themes or continuity. It started with The Force Awakens, which, while it was good, was a blatant ripoff of A New Hope. Most of what it did wasn't original, such as the spaceships, as none have changed in design in the 30 years since the Empire fell. Even Starkiller's base is a more extensive and powerful version of the Death Star. Additionally, it had a similar plot, such as blowing up a massive planet-killer space station and killing a beloved character. Most original trilogy characters were written like worn down and down on their luck people, rather than the iconic and brave heroes they once were. A particular new character was introduced with no flaws or experience, yet passed everything. You might already know who I am mentioning. I was disappointed with the film for a while. However, I later came to a degree of enjoyment, but was mainly dissatisfied. The following entry in this trilogy was The Last Jedi, which had many people wanting more from the final project. I will be transparent and say I enjoyed this film when I watched it. I was satisfied with what I thought was an original story. I loved how genuinely different the ending, beginning, and even setup was from The Force Awakens. But over time, the more I thought about and discussed the film with others, the more I saw its flaws. I noticed how it rewrites one of the most admired heroes in sci-fi as a lousy bum who has given up all thanks to one mistake, which would be Luke Skywalker, a man who risked his life for friends and became a hero to the rebels. And even the galaxy, became a hermit in a matter of days. No wonder Mark Hamill was trying to warn us. Additionally, the Holdo maneuver broke the entire concept and use of hyperspace, and most of the audience wondered why this had yet to be done before. Considering all this, I no longer liked The Last Jedi. As I waited patiently for what I didn't know was the last entry in the franchise, The Rise of Skywalker, I wanted the next film, by some miracle, to become the saving grace for the franchise. I was excited when the trailer was released, and when I saw the last Star Wars film, I was pleased with how it ended. However, as I looked back on the film, it seemed to have quite a list of flaws. The idea of Rey being a Skywalker didn't seem possible, and it was not a very satisfying conclusion to the Skywalker lineage. It didn't help that people didn't know precisely how Emperor Palpatine returned. Then it was later explained in a movie book adaptation. Furthermore, Emperor Palpatine's return undermined Anakin Skywalker's journey and purpose of being the chosen one. And to make matters worse, plot lines that should have been resolved never got settled. With all this being said, I then left the entire trilogy. Given how ridiculous everything was, I was saddened that Disney fumbled this whole franchise. I was starting to give up hope on the franchise, but then The Mandalorian on Disney Plus came along. It was refreshing. The story had a different protagonist and was just an enjoyable and pleasing tale that didn't feel galaxy threatening, but was still satisfying. The second season of The Mandalorian continued this trend, and I was delighted with everything happening in Star Wars. However, my satisfaction with the franchise was quickly dashed thanks to the book of Boba Fett, which had its problems. Some were, how did the most renowned and beloved bounty hunter become a townsman? How did the season decide to become The Mandalorian Season 3, Episodes 1 and 2.5 halfway through the season? Why did we get a silly-looking moped gang helping Boba? Was Grogu's training even worth it? You get my point. Another low point in Star Wars, but then came the announcement that the Obi-Wan Kenobi Disney Plus show was happening. Now, let me tell you, I was very excited about this. The show looked great, with the legendary Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen set to return. However, I noticed that Dave Filoni wasn't involved, which made me doubt it. Regardless, I came in with an open mind, and at the beginning, it could have worked, but by the end, it lost its plot. There was Obi-Wan, who became a sad hermit, an insulting parallel to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Reva is not a very fleshed out character, and could take a lightsaber stab in the guts and survive. Yeah, spoilers, that sort of scenario is widespread in Disney's Star Wars. The whole Leia was missing and then captured by the Empire, so if the Imperials had used their 2 brain cells, they would have figured out that Alderaan was lying and conspiring this entire time. Also, can we talk about the first fight scene with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader theater in the show because that set felt cheap and not very Star Wars. This show greatly sorrowed me, and now I just like to think it is no longer canon because it doesn't mess with things. At this point, I was done with Star Wars, but I saw stuff for Andor and was particularly excited for the upcoming show. However, during my recent experience with Obi-Wan, I didn't know if I wanted to spend any of my time on this show. With caution, I decided to give Andor a chance. I didn't like it initially, but as I continued to watch it, it became the best piece of Star Wars media created by Disney. It made us care about characters we hardly knew by giving us time to learn about them. The show's creators expertly displayed the pure might and terror that was the Empire. Andor, in the beginning, was not about the rebellious hero we knew in Rogue One. Still, throughout the show, we see how he becomes that hero. On top of this, the visual effects were excellent. The score was different yet distinctly Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars was back, and it could be a sign of great things to come, especially since The Mandalorian Season 3 would come out after that. I hoped the next season of The Mandalorian would work, and maybe Disney wouldn't mess it up. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, because it too didn't live up to its potential. Why was The Mandalorian just willing to give his Darksaber to Bo-Katan? Also, why were these two working so peacefully when The Mandalorian had the Darksaber and Bo-Katan wanted it so desperately back? Why did we have to go to these planets? They didn't prove any significance. Why did Mando want to rejoin his cult? Was there a reason? How come no one went to Mandalore to see if it was no longer habitable? Once again, another show with great potential fell flat on its face, and I was once again dissatisfied. Ahsoka was the next show on the horizon, and I decided that if this show were insufficient, I would leave Star Wars and move on. I was interested initially, but as soon as Sabine was stabbed with a lightsaber, I knew it would be downhill from here, and indeed it was. Ahsoka and the rest of the characters in the show seemed to show little emotion, adding that when there was supposed to be an emotional reunion, it lacked any sentiment. My favorite thing about Ahsoka is that all the dialogue is delivered with an awkward silence between each statement. Although Star Wars has been known to have wooden dialogue, at least it sounded like a regular conversation. But my biggest pet peeve against Ahsoka was that Sabine, with little to almost no training in the Force, could use it flawlessly when it was most convenient. To add insult to injury, Anakin Skywalker decided to help Ahsoka with her issues rather than helping his son, who needed help to make the new Jedi Order. Recently, I read Heir to the Empire, where in the novel, Obi-Wan visits Luke Skywalker in a vision to inform him that he is passing on in the afterlife and will no longer assist him. Luke is genuinely sad, tasked with creating a republic after the Empire's fall, and has to create a new Jedi Order for his nephews, as Leia is pregnant with twins. I understand that Heir to the Empire is no longer canon, but I would still imagine that Luke Skywalker would need a Force ghost of his father to help him create the new Jedi Order. After Ahsoka, I gave up on Star Wars. I was saddened that a franchise I loved and cared so deeply about was treated with no regard. It did whatever the higher-ups at Disney wanted it to do. As a last-ditch effort, I tried The High Republic by reading the book Light of the Jedi, which begins the era of the High Republic. I didn't enjoy this book for a significant reason. It was trying to set Star Wars on a galactic scale without having a primary set of characters to which the reader could relate. Let me give you an example. By the way, spoilers if you care. At the beginning of the book, we focus on a pilot of the ship, the Legacy Run, that is taking a bunch of people to the Outer Rim so that they can have a better life. However, as they head into hyperspace, something hits the ship. While in hyperspace, the ship breaks into several pieces and the pilot dies. We then change the focus from the pilot to someone who monitors everything that comes in and out of hyperspace on a space station and notices several objects that are coming out of hyperspace at ridiculous speeds. He then notifies the neighboring planet of the issue, and before he has any chance of elaborating, dies as one of the remnants hits and obliterates the station. It goes on like this for the remainder of the book, introducing us to characters we get to know for a chapter or two, and then killing them off. There are characters that follow their storylines and survive. Still, I missed understanding a list of characters. They get buried in the details and are not memorable. I got such whiplash from this book that it took a week or two to stop reading the book because I was getting frustrated by it. If this is what is supposed to kick off your next era of Star Wars, this is going to perplex and confuse your audience. A fair amount of people felt this way too when reading the book. I tried to understand what was going on in the High Republic, so I watched YouTube videos discussing the entire lore of the High Republic, and that made matters worse, because it was confusing as the story kept introducing characters and then sometimes returned to other characters' stories. With my recent experience with the High Republic, I wasn't missing much, and it was rather hard to follow, so I also left that era of Star Wars. Suppose you love any recent changes or projects related to Star Wars. In that case, I'm not trying to criticize your opinion. My favorite Disney Star Wars film is Rogue One: A Star Wars Story, which many agree is terrific. However, I am not oblivious to its problems, such as not establishing its characters well or having an excellent first and second act. Despite its problems, I love its other themes, such as sacrifice and fighting for the greater good, so that others have new hope for the future. I can still love this film, yet still acknowledge its problems. I am more critical of the other Star Wars projects because they have more issues than redeeming qualities. Star Wars is an incredible franchise that I have come to love dearly, but now with everything happening with it, I am saddened by how this franchise has become. There were new projects, but the more added, the more the universe was diluted. The themes of good and evil seemed to blur the lines between the two, as more projects tried to address the piece. Pieces of the established canon were then discarded for new, not as satisfying pieces of the canon. So, how did Disney mess up Star Wars? That'll be addressed in part 2. Thank you for watching.